Hey, how are you doing? Last devotion, we started this look at the parable of the Good Samaritan, and we come down to verse number 29 in Luke chapter number 10, and it says, "But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, 'And who is my neighbor?' And Jesus replied, 'A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down at the road, and when he saw him, he passed on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, 'Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back.' Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers?" He said, "The one who showed him mercy." And Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." And so Jesus was dealing with this lawyer who wanted to justify himself, wanted to be self-righteous, wanted to limit his responsibility, goes into a parable, and it's interesting. He starts off, and this was a normal route from Jerusalem to Jericho, about 17 miles, and it could be very dangerous. So it wasn't unthinkable that someone had robbed him. And they stripped him and they left him for dead. And it says, now by chance, a priest was coming down. Now, a priest would be coming back from his temple service, 2 weeks of temple service, and he would see someone who was injured, and he sees this man, and he doesn't want to become unclean, so he crosses the road, because his understanding of his responsibility of the law was to stay pure, ceremony pure, so he could eat of the sacrifices that he was bringing home. And he passes the other side and goes on. And likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, pass on the other side. Same thing. Their understanding of the law kept them from having compassion. Now, they might have been thinking that, well, maybe it was a Jew who had come down from the temple would be the third person, but Jesus turns the whole story on him, and he uses the dreaded Samaritan. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and he saw him, and he had compassion. Now, we don't really understand all of this, but there was great animus between the Jewish people and the Samaritans, and the Jewish people treated the Samaritans like they were half-breeds, that they weren't really religious or true to Judaism, and they despise these people. And it really bothers them, I'm sure, that Jesus is going to use the Samaritan who they hated to be the hero of the story. And he had compassion. And he went to him and bound up his wounds, and he poured oil and wine, which were used for medicinal purposes, on wounds. And he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn, and he took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back." And he asked him very clearly in the 36th verse, "Which of these 3 do you think proved to be neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers?" He asked the lawyer, the expert in the law, who was neighbor. Now, he was the one who was trying to limit his responsibility. He didn't want to be like Jesus, who was treating the prostitute, the woman caught in the act, the tax collector, all of the outcasts of society. He didn't want to be responsible to these people. He wanted to be able to treat them with disdain. But here comes the Samaritan, and the Samaritan loves this person, has compassion on this person. The man took care of him. He took care of his wounds. He binds him up. He puts him on his own animal and takes him. The Samaritans, They thought of them like dogs. So how could a Samaritan be the one that brings life? Because this was all about, how do I inherit eternal life? The hatred between the two groups was very at the core. And he departed. He gave them 2 pence. He made sure there was no debt. Look at verse number 37. He says to him, the one who showed him mercy. This poor lawyer, maybe a Pharisee, one who was a separatist in their practice, couldn't even bring himself to say the Samaritan. He says, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said to him, you go and do likewise. Now, I don't think this is a story really about roadside assistance, but about who your neighbor is. And this is a story about hatred and bigotry and racism, and maybe those who have done us dirty. And the lawyer wanted to justify himself, and that really was his first mistake. He wanted it to be an abstract theological debate, but Jesus didn't want to let him continue in the misery of his hatred. Hatred is bondage, and there are names you have a hard time saying, and it was Samaritan. Is there anybody you need to free from the shackles of your hatred? Is there anyone that you don't want to consider your neighbor? Because this is the very person that Christ is calling you to see as your neighbor. And he says, you go and do likewise. And so, friends, I wanted to encourage you this week to be thinking, who in your life needs you to be neighbor? It may be someone who's hurt you, or someone you don't like, or a group of people that you don't like. And he calls you to be neighbor. And he calls us, as those who are vessels indwelt by the life of Christ, to be people who reveal the very love and life of Jesus Christ through us to all mankind. We should have no natural enemies. So let him live in you, yes, and let him live his life through you. Don't try and limit your responsibility to loving others. Go and do likewise. Have a great week. Love you. Bye-bye.